Hi, welcome to my video on solve by square root property. Solve by square root property is just another way of solving a quadratic. When finding the square root of a number, you always give the positive or principal square root. As an example, the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 9 over 25 is 3 over 5. Square root of 20 is 4 times 5, so it's 2 root 5. 7 over 4 is the square root of 7 over the square root of 4, which is root 7 over 2. It's the positive one. Notice you have the square root given to you. So the square root of 49, practice, work these out, is 7. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 36 over 121 is 6 over 11. Square root of 18 is 9 times 2, so it's a 3 root 2. Square root of 11 over 16 is the square root of 11 divided by the square root of 16, which is root 11 over 4. So you're given the square root and you're asked to find the square root of 4 with the symbol. If the roots are real, then one root is going to be positive and the other root is going to be negative. Let's explain. What number squared results in each? So if you square a number to get 9, well, that number could have been 3. Or the number could have been negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So the answer is 3 or negative 3. What number squared results in 64? Well, that could have been an 8 squared, which is 64. Or it could have been a negative 8 squared, which is 64. Because a negative 8 times a negative 8 is 64. So what number squared gives you 64? It could have been 8 or negative 8. What number squared gives you 5? Well, it is the root of 5. Because remember, if you want to get a 9, the square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 64 is an 8. So the square root of 5 is root 5. Or we could have the negative of root 5. And both of them will work. If you square 5, if you square root 5, you'll get a 5. If you square negative root 5, you'll also get a 5. So what I'm doing now is developing an idea that I need to use for the square root property. Practice. What number squared results in each? Well, the square root of 4 is 2, so we can have a 2 or a negative 2. Square root of 25 is 5, so we can have a 5 or a negative 5. Square root of 36 is 6, so we could have a 6 or a negative 6. Square root of 100 is 10. Oh, so we can have, what, two numbers, 10 or negative 10. Square root of 6, so root 6 squared is 6, or we could have negative root 6, the plus or the minus. And 12 is 4 times 3, so we could have a 2 root 3, or we could have a negative 2 root 3. Notice when we square them, we'll get 2 root 3 squared is 2 root 3 times 2 root 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 50 is a 25 times 2, so we have a 5 root 2. Or we could have negative 5 root 2. Remember, the positive or the negative squared will give you the number. And 1/9 is 1 over 3 or negative 1 over 3. And 7 over 4 is the square root of 7 over 2. Or we could have the negative root 7 over 2. So if you're asked what numbers will work out, then you have to have the plus minus. But if you're given the root, like up here, you can only have one answer, which is 2. But if you're asked for what numbers, you can have the plus or the minus. Let's continue. Simplify each, another skill we need to get command of. Simplify each. All expressions are positive. So the square root of x squared is x. The square root of a squared is a. Notice the square root of 9x squared is 3x. Notice the square root of x plus 2 squared is x plus 2. The square root of x minus 4 all squared is x minus 4. And the square root of 2x plus 1 squared is 2x plus 1. The square root of 4 squared is 4. And the square root of x minus 3 all squared, x minus root 3 all squared is x minus root 3. Notice when you're doing the square root of this square, you just get the number or the term that's there. And like x plus 2 squared, square root, it's just x plus 2. And practice, we're going to need this when we do the square root properties, so see if you get these right. The square root of 3 squared is 3. Now you could call it 9 and then say 3, but notice because you have 3 squared square root, you just get the 3. This one is 16x squared, because the square root of that square, they cancel, and you get 16x squared. This one is 25x. This one is x plus 7. Number 5 is x minus 10. Number 6 is 6x plus 11. And number 7 is x plus 6. And number 8 is x minus 1. So notice the square root of this term squared, you just take what's being squared, x plus 6, x minus 10, etc., etc. We're going to need that as we move on for the doing the square root property, which is another way to solve quadratics. Now let's explain. The standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not 0. We cannot have a 0, because if we do, if a is 0, then we don't have a quadratic, we have a linear of bx plus c. So, and also the way we're doing it, we'd also say that a is going to be positive, greater than 0, and we're going to have no fractions or decimals. But that's me. I want no fractions or decimals, and I do not want a negative. It's just the way I work it, but a lot of teachers might not go with what I'm saying here. When you take this equation and you let b equal to 0, the equation becomes ax squared plus 0x plus c equals 0. So that means the equation becomes ax squared plus c equals 0. Again, when the b becomes 0, this standard form is now changed to this form, because notice the x is missing. Because the x is missing in between here, that means the b coordinate is 0. And let's continue to solve. Solving ax squared plus b equals 0. We're going to take this equation, c, b is gone. We're going to take this equation, ax squared plus c equals 0, which is what I have here. We're going to solve this equation by the square root property. Notice the b is equal to 0 for this to happen. So here's the equation. The steps. We're going to move c, which is this number, to the right side and change the sign. We're going to divide all the terms by a and simplify. Then we're going to do the square root of each side. And the plus minus has to be placed on the right side. Why plus minus? Because a quadratic has two roots. One is positive and one is negative. And then we're going to simplify each side. So here's the steps I'm going to practice. So some examples. Solve for x. Notice there's no x in the middle. Because there's no x in the middle, b is 0. So we're going to solve. We're going to move the c over. So 4x squared equals 4. Minus 4 becomes plus 4. We're going to divide each side by 4. They cancel. I get x squared equals 1. Now, I'm in to do the square root of each side. I'm going to do the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 1. So I'm doing the square root of each side, but I have to do the plus minus because there's two answers. So the square root of x squared is x, and plus minus square root of 1 is 1. So there's two answers that fits in here. Because it's a quadratic x squared, there's two answers of plus minus 1. Notice this happens, this method, when b is 0. There's no x. And again, part B, an example, I have to move the 28 to the right side, make it positive. I have to divide by 7. 7's cancel. X squared is equal to 4. And I do the square root of both sides, plus minus square root of 4. I do the square root of x squared here. I do the square root of 4 here, but I have to put the plus minus in. Square root of x squared is x plus minus 2. And again, if you take the 2 and sub back here, just take the 2, sub back in. 2 squared, 4. 7 times 4, 28. 28 minus 28, 0. Put the negative 2 back in here. Negative 2 in brackets squared is a 4. 7 times 4 is 28, minus 28, 0. So notice you have two answers. Again, note b is equal to 0. b is 0 in this equation, resulting in this form, where b is 0. Notice that's a 0x. b is 0. And this is, we solve it by the square root property, which is going to help us to do other forms. C, x squared equals 9. Notice now we don't have to divide because it's already a 1. So the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 9. X equals square root of x squared is x plus minus 3. Again, two answers. One is plus and one is minus. So you don't have, you can check it with your teacher. You can say x is equal to 1 or negative 1, or that's the same as saying plus minus. You could say x is equal to 2 or negative 2. That's the same as saying plus minus. D, let's continue. Negative 3x squared equals negative 75 when you move it over. Divide by negative 3. Negative 3's canceled out. X squared is equal to 25. Square root of x squared equals plus minus the square root of 25. So x equals plus minus 5. And that's some examples. Let's see what we have on the other page. Oh, we have some more to do. Extra practice. Pause the video and work these out. I have another example. X squared minus 8 equals 0. X squared equals 8. The square root of x squared equals plus minus the square root of 8. The square root of x squared is x plus minus, and the root of 8 is 4 times 2, so that's plus minus 2 root 2. Square root of 4 is 2, with the 2 left in. And f, we have a negative 4x squared equals negative 1. Divide by negative 4. Negative 4's cancel. X squared equals 1/4. Square root of x squared is plus minus the square root of 1/4. Square root of x squared is x. Plus minus the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. So plus minus a half. Again, x is equal to a half or a negative a half. That's what's meant by the plus minus. And practice means if you know what you're doing and you want to try, work each one of these out and press pause, work them out. When you get it done, press play to see if you're right. And do that for each question just to make sure you're knowing what you're doing. You can do them all and then check, but it's easier or better to do each one. So 3x squared equals 12. Negative move over, we go plus. Divide by 3. 3's cancel. X squared equals 4. The square root of x squared equals plus minus the square root of 4. Square root of x squared is x. And plus minus the square root of 4 is 2. Number 2, x squared minus 36 equals 0. X squared equals 36. The square root of x squared equals plus minus the square root of 36. Square root of x squared is x plus minus the square root of 6. Again, you can see that put a 6 here. 6 squared is 36 minus 36 is 0. Put a negative 6 here. Negative 6 in brackets squared is 36 minus 36, 0. Number 3, 7x squared equals 77. Divide by 7. 7's cancel. X squared is equal to 11. And the square root of x squared equals plus minus the square root of 11. Square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 11, when we solve, we want the exact values as a root. Now you could change it to a decimal, but it's better to have the square root of. And sometimes the teachers will say, solve for x exact values, which means they don't want the root changed to a decimal. And number 4, negative 5x squared equals negative 90. Divide by negative 5, cancels. X squared is equal to 5 into 90, negative and negative positive. 5 into 90 goes, let's see, 5 is 40, it looks like it's an 18. And the square root of x squared is plus minus the square root of 18. X equals plus or minus. 18 is 9 times 2, the square root of 9 is 3, root 2. Okay, 2 answers. Notice quadratic. And number 5, we have 8x squared equals 6. Divide by 8. X squared equals, we can reduce this to be 3 over 4. It's easier to reduce the fraction. And x square root of x squared plus minus the square root of 3 over 4. And that gives me x plus minus, and that's the square root of 3 over the square root of 4, which is root 3 over 2. So it's a positive root 3 over 2 and a minus root 3 over 2. And number 6, we got a negative 50x squared equals negative 8. Divide by negative 50. It cancels, I get x squared is equal to a positive. Notice 2 will go into 8 4 times, 2 will go into 50 25 times. And that's the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 4 over 25. So the square root of x squared is x, plus minus, square root of 4 is 2, square root of 25 is 5. 2 answers. Notice the quadratic. And notice in all of these problems, b is equal to 0, which means there's no x. So we do the square root property in that case. It's called the square root property in solving equations. Again, when the x is missing, you can do that. And number 7, the last one. This one is solve and check. Okay, here we go. Let's solve. Again, b is missing, so 5x squared equals 5. Divide by 5. 5's cancel. X squared is equal to 1. The square root of x squared is equal to plus minus the square root of 1. Square root of x squared is x equals plus or minus the square root of 1 is 1. So we have one value, x is 1, x is negative 1. Let's check each of these into the equation. So we have 5x squared minus 5 equals 0. X is 1. So we're going to sub 1 in the place of x and solve the equation. And PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, which we have to always obey when simplifying. We do the powers first. That'll give me a 1. 1 squared is 1. We have to multiply. So notice we're doing the inside of the bracket is 1, so that's done. We do the exponent of 2. We multiply and divide next, which we've done. And the last is add or subtract from left to right. So we have a 1, true. Now we're going to check negative 1. So here's the equation. We're going to sub negative 1, excuse me, negative 1 into place of x. Again, PEMDAS, We do our bracket first. Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. Then we multiply next, left to right. We multiply this before we subtract. And then we get a 0 equals 0. So again, that's true. So again, the solutions are plus minus 1. Or you could say x equals 1 or x equals negative 1. Again, check with your teacher. This is okay. Which way that you want to write it, because the teacher is the one that has to mark your quizzes and things like that. And that's solving by the square root property. Remember, now we solve by factoring and we solve by the square root property. But the square root property works when you have b equal to 0. If you like my video, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell. Visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. And that's the content that's going to be on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Thank you for viewing my video. Bye-bye.